Thank you. My name is George Kent, and I live just up the road out here,
Yes.
just this side of White Creek. And I moved down here with Donna back in 2014 when we got married. We both love the beach. Up here on the table, I have some USGS 7.5 minute quadrangle sheets that have scale. If you want to look at them, it's all through the years. You can see everything change here. And some older maps of Ocean View. When I started with the department, we had an atlas or a book of all incorporated cities and towns in Delaware. And through the years, you can see the area around Bethlehem Beach and Ocean View start growing a lot. So they're up there for you to look at, and that's some old tools I used to use when I used to make the maps. Can you? Oh, yes.
You want to go?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Aaron Bell. After I retired, he took over in the mapping section. He's a great guy, and he provided a lot of the materials, maps and stuff here today. And so I'm thankful to Delaware and to Aaron. When I started with the department, there was 52 incorporated cities and towns in the state of Delaware. According to us in mapping, a city is 5,000 people or more. Anything less than that is a town. And sometimes the towns have a name like Ardentown or Delaware City. For years we had 5 more towns crop up in Delaware. It was Ardentown, Ardencroft, Open Acres, Dewey Beach, and South Bethany. When South Bethany became a incorporated town back around 1970 or so, my boss and I came down here to walk the boundaries. The first pipe was in the Atlantic Ocean, a couple hundred feet offshore. So we went to pipe number 2 and went all around the town. A lot of these markers can't be found anymore. The bulk of the mapping section, when I was there was 4 of us. We're affectionately known as the mapping boys. Everybody calls us the mapping boys. Ed Dano from Milford, he started in the 1950s and went from pen and ink drawings into scribe sheets and color separated maps. And Ken Blado came down from New York. He was in the Air Force. He retired, came on into mapping. And Steve Smith, he came in. He worked half a day, or he went to school in the morning and came up here to mapping in the afternoon. And then he stayed for quite a few years. And we all got along very well together. We all have the same password. Because if Ken wasn't there, Steve could do it. You know, sometimes we go someplace, they'll say, Judy's not there, you come back tomorrow. She's on maternity leave, she's out for 8 months or something like that. But we always had somebody that could take over. I'm just going to name some of these why the borders of Delaware or of any place are so important. And it says here, a fatal accident on Concord Pike, that's up in northern Delaware, 202, in 1960 led to a costly question. The New York Times reported in 1975, did the victim die in Delaware or Pennsylvania? Who had jurisdiction? The boundary markers were missing. The National Geodetic Survey was called in at a cost of almost $50,000. Its surveyors determined that after 4 months' work that the man had died 1 foot inside of Delaware. I got a call years ago. There was an accident on the Delaware Memorial Bridge up near Newcastle, and they wanted to know where the accident happened. Well, that was easy. The 2 uprights on the bridge are in Delaware. Our boundary goes, that arc up at northern end of Delaware goes all the way over to the low water mark of New Jersey and on down, and it becomes part of the artificial island. I'm going to be jumping all over the place. This is called, I'm going to be all over the map tonight. This is just little things here and there, but I'm not there's a lot of knowledge in this room tonight about the town right here, Ocean View, so I don't want to, if you ask me anything, just make it an easy question if you would. But these are some of the names of cities or crossroads and towns and places in Delaware. Appoquinimink, Brick Store, Hamville, Joe's Hole out of Bombay Hook, Rattlesnake Hill, Old Woman's Gut, Eskaski, Berrytown, Beach Native Ditch, Hourglass. Has anybody heard of these so far? The Bow, Bread and Cheese Island, Husband's Run, Flea Hill, Nonesuch Creek, but it is a creek. Wigville, Devil's Woodyard, Bullseye, Cross Keys, Locustville, No Man's Friend Reach. The Reach is a straight part of the stream. There's a Silver Lake in Rehoboth, Silver Lake in Milford, Silver Lake in Dover, Silver Lake in Middletown, Silver Lake in Newark. Then we also have Spindle Mountain and Corner Catch. That's up near the wedge at the top of Delaware. It used to be a pretty rough tavern up there. There's more visitors coming through on the stage. Watch out, I'll catch you at the corner. That's how I got its name up there. If any of you have grandchildren or you teach kindergarten or something, you can make I just got that off the internet. Just get a blank map of the United States. You can give them 4 colored pencils. They can color every state without two of them, their borders touching. On a globe, it takes 5 colors. Nobody knows why that is, but that's what it is. Does anybody in here know what the furthest north state is in the lower 48 contiguous states?
Minnesota.
Right.
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
I thought Alaska would be.
No, they're not Minnesota.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that part.
That wasn't a pointer.
It's on your reflector.
Oh, thank you.
A little piece on Lake of the Woods.
Right up there. Sometimes I'll ask Donna what she's thinking about, my wife, and she'll say, new recipe. She says I'm linear. And what I was thinking about the other night was Minnesota and the northwest angle. You could go into the next. That's the northwest angle right there. Going up. And I had a piece of paper that explains it. I might be able to find it a little bit later. The farthest east state,
North Carolina. Florida?
Massachusetts.
of the entire 50 states.
Massachusetts.
The furthest east.
The furthest east.
Florida.
Alaska. Correct. It goes over the 180 longitude. Very good. Now, who in the world is Thomas West? Never stepped a foot inside the state of Delaware, but he was known as the 12th Baron Delaware. He lived from 1577 to 1618, and never been to Delaware. And they named the Delaware River and the Delaware Bay after Thomas West, who lived in Delaware. And then the state of Delaware later was named after the bay and the river. So that's how we got our name of Delaware. There was a man that came over from, he was a Dutch explorer. His name was Cornelius Jacobson May. And I need a volunteer from the audience. How about the young lady right here? Second row.
You want a young lady.
I won't embarrass you too much.
Okay.
Top is on your seat. Hold that up to the shoulders. Just against you. We're right in here somewhere right now. This is quad sheet of Ocean View. Now, would you open this up? She's now standing geographically correct. If she was to lay down, this is north, her feet would be south. Her left elbow will be east, and this one will be west. Now, when Cornelius Jacobson May came into the country, or the continent over here, he came on up the coast, and he's naming different places as he came up. And he looked over at Fenwick Island. Fenwick Island actually goes from about the Ocean City Inlet up to the inlet up here, Indian River Inlet, and that's Fenwick Island. The town of Fenwick Island is just right down here. But when he came up the coast here, there's a little place there called Cape Henlopen now. His name was Cornelius Jacobson May. He named that cape right there, Cape Cornelius. He came across the bay and he called that the Straits of Jacobson. And then he went on up to New Jersey and he named that Cape May. May, people back then didn't spell too good, so his name's sometimes spelled M-E-Y or M-A-Y. Now, when people came into the United States, did you open some?
Pardon?
You got your elbows up?
Yeah.
They came in from Europe and they're headed in this direction. To their right is the Atlantic Ocean, behind them is the Atlantic Ocean, and to the left is the Atlantic Ocean. Everything was Atlantic Ocean, so they're headed west in the United States, and when they made some of those early maps, west was up. And here's a map right here where west is up, and here's another one right here where west is up. And thank you for, you can keep that shirt. The other prizes tonight aren't too good. But when you leave, usually when the Department of Transportation revises a map, they have some left over, and they, whatever's left over, they give to schools or just any organization. Here's some older Sussex County maps. You can have them when you leave. I have some maps in the state of Delaware. You can have those when you leave. The Mason-Dixon line. I had read that the what they wanted to do to make the Trans-Peninsula line, which is from Fenwick Island past Delaware, that was made before the Mason-Dixon line. And what they do, the earlier surveyors, if I have this right, it was John Watson and William Parsons, went walking down the beach here. If you walk down this beach, many of you have, without seeing any buildings, there's nothing but sand, dunes, water, and what they did, they just kept on walking. Where are you going to start that Trans-Peninsula line? Well, they got down to about Fenwick Island, and they saw a stake in the sand. And just like when the pioneers came into Salt Lake City, the guy said, this is the place. Those two surveyors said, this must be the place. And that's where they started. That stake actually is believed to be a stake put in the ground for fishing to tie the nets up on. Anyway, that's where they started. Some of you heard of Lord Baltimore?
Yeah.
And the Baltimore family and the Cowboys, they had a big fight over the boundary lines. The Cowboys in Baltimore actually gave the surveyors the wrong map, which called down there Cape Henlopen. The map was otherwise we'd be in Maryland right now, paying taxes. So they started and they went all the way to the Chesapeake. It was 75 miles, so they cut that line in half. It's 35 miles. So the Trans-Peninsula line is 35 miles west of Fenwick Island. And then Mason and Dixon started there at the midpoint of the Trans-Peninsula line, and they went north to hit the arc up in Newcastle County. This is the 12-mile radius where they didn't want the government of Pennsylvania to come within 12 miles of Delaware. And if you look at that arc, there's a little bulge right there. That's part of that arc that comes down. And if you look down here at Artificial Island, that's the bottom part of that arc coming around. And that's where the boundary of Delaware changed its course, and it went down at several turning points here to right between Cape Henlopen and Cape May. Now, some of you may remember back in the 70s, a gas shortage when you're standing and sitting in your car, and something like if you had a license plate put it in an even number, you get gas on Tuesdays, Thursdays, remember? And everybody started panicking a little bit, and we all did. But people started wondering, oil, where are we going to find oil? So what are we going to do with the boundary line of Delaware when it gets down here between Cape May and Cape Henlopen? The line goes down, so you're just going to extend it all the way down. If you do that, Delaware's going to miss a lot. Or when you get to that point, are you going to go along the parallel, straight across, 12 miles? Or If you take a compass and you go down a mile and mark it on the shoreline, another mile up, you take another compass, make where they two intersect, you can make a bunch of them, but it might come out even. Nothing's ever come of that that I'm aware of right now. So it's still an indeterminate boundary. On our maps, we use the Mercator grid system. I think it might be used on some of these USGS maps. We do that because it's called a Universal Transverse Mercator Grid System. It's named after a map maker named Mercator. And I always thought that would be a good name for a pet or a cat or something, Mercator. But anyway, why we use the Mercator grid system in Delaware is because the distance north-south of Delaware is greater than the east-west. So what the Mercator grid system does, it always puts an arc over Delaware, and you project all the lines up there, and when you open up that arc, unfold the paper, make it flat, everything's correct. So if you go 1,500 feet, 3 degrees west on that map, and you get on the ground and you get your theodolite and you do the same, it's the same place. Other projections are a little bit different. You've seen different projection maps where Greenland looks like it's huge. One of the better projections I saw years ago was a Robinson projection, and it makes the whole Earth look like they're at the right size, the right scale of all the countries there. There's something on maps every once in a while, and I have one right here. Let's do this. This is the Sussex County Atlas put out by ABC, Alexander Chapman Company. And it's an atlas of Sussex County. And if you look at every page on here, you're going to find something that doesn't belong there. Either a little development or crossroads that said, where'd they get that name? And they do that to see if anybody's copyrighted their maps. And we call them bunnies. I put one on a map years ago. I went down to Leisure Point with the family, and my then father-in-law, they're all sitting around the campfire, the sun's going down, the fire's going up, there's a lot of laughter, the music's real high. My father-in-law had an idea, and he jumped in his boat, and he went a little bit too fast north on Guinea Creek. The problem with that is Guinea Creek runs east and west. So when he went airborne and his boat landed on the other side of Guinea Creek, he was over there with a flashlight with the Morse code, and he was yelling at him, wait. And finally somebody said, isn't that Bill over there? And they pulled his boat off. And the next morning there was 2 bean poles there with a big sheet that said Bill's Point. So the next official highway map, for that one map, I put Bill's Point on the enlargement of all the Atlantic Ocean communities right here, and then took it off when the next issue came out. What we used when we made maps, we got into scribe sheets. And scribe sheets, we had 4 scribe sheets. We use 4 color maps. We use CYMK, cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. And we use 4 colors. With those 4 colors, if you have a plotter, you can make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of different colors. Blue and yellow, you got green, you make all sorts of shades of that. So that's where I started my mapping, was on these scribe sheets. It started back in the early 60s. And what it is, it's on stable base, it's called stable. It's on stable base material. So if it's 50 degrees in the room or 100 degrees, that thing's not going to stretch or shrink or anything. We needed stable base materials because we put each of these scribe sheets right on top of each other. They have to register. So there's 4 scribe sheets, the negatives for every map, 4 overlays, which is the brown type and the blue type and the names of different things, and something called a peel coat, or cut and peel. We usually call it peel coats. And you just go around with a swivel knife and you peel it off, you got a window there, and that could be the inside of the lake, and it has to register with all that. And we had these printed usually at A. Hohen and Company in Baltimore or over in D.C. at Williams and Heights. We always had the county maps printed over there because there's no press in the state of Delaware that can print these. That map that I was talking about, Sussex County, the map was 5 feet long, so you had the rest of it, the map all around it. So it came up to probably 65, 68 inches big. what we all had to do, when you scribe sheet, use these scribe sheets, I have scribers right here, which are sometimes called gravers. Here's one right here. This is called a swivel. It's got a bevel base to it, so when you scribe the map, you can look through it with one of these scopes. It'll be the sharpest line you've ever seen. It's just very precise. And back then you could line up the Delaware maps made by us and Maryland got, and they would match. But we use those for each color. And wasn't a problem, but when you scribe maps, you have to turn the map upside down. You're always working in reverse. So north and south are right, but east and west are flipped over, or just the opposite way. And we sent these all over. We revised them every few years, and we used opaque on them. And I'll explain that when we get to the legends on here. This is from the University of Delaware postcard collection. I found Ocean View. Here you are down here at 26, and that's looking up this street out front here. That house might still be there, I'm not sure. And this is a kid on a bike right here. And here's what was on the back. This is the main street. Get all the breeze you want down here. But the mosquitoes are not educated at all. Just imagine 6 girls in 2 rooms and all dressed in one, having all the peaches and apples you want. And this is from 1912. That's what it looked like there. This is another postcard I found. I don't know if it's this Ocean View or another one, but if I see Ocean View, I'm going to collect it. Okay. Lord Delaware. That's Thomas West. So you know when you see him now. That's who he was. Good. I've got just took some pictures. I didn't do a real good job using my phone to take these pictures. It has the agreement of 1732. The boundary adjustment in 1732 provided for land drawn due west from Cape Midlothian on Fenwick's Island, across the peninsula from the center of which another line should be drawn, tangent to a circle, which is the circle up there, 12 miles from Newcastle. And that's just a map of Fenwick Island at the time. This is called Seal Island. If you turn it the other way, it always looks like a seal in a circus sitting on one of those little platforms. It's changed a little bit. Yeah. This is the Mason-Dixon line according to the Delaware Police Department. That's not the Mason-Dixon line. That's the Trans-Peninsula line. The Mason-Dixon line's over there. But then down the street here, we have a Mason-Dixon trailer court down there, but you can call that anything you want. But I've called them and they said, yeah, they know. I think it would just probably be too expensive to put get a new logo, put on the side of their building or the patches or something. But that's not the Mason-Dixon line. They almost, but not quite. This is just an old map of Ocean View. These are always fun to look at. So I'll give you, you can see the Coast Guard station there and Cedar Neck. And that's called White Creek. It's still White Creek. A lot of the locals sometimes call it White's Creek, but it is White Creek. And the inlet is on there somewhere. It's moved 4 or 5 times, I think. And this is this map right here, Baltimore 100, from the Beers Atlas. Some of you might be familiar with that, so I'll give you a few minutes. There's Hall's store right here.
And it's mud map, not muddy word.
Yeah. I'm going to show a book in a little while that has Delaware place names. You don't have the correct agreed upon by the Board of Geographic Names, and they have all the previous names in that book. You'll see Hall's Store, which is now Ocean View, and Mud Neck, which is now Muddy Neck, and it has all the variant names in there.
But it does say White Snack, it has the S on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that's White Neck.
What year is that now?
1868. You can buy these in some antique stores. I think there's a place up in Lewis on 2nd Street that has some too. And up the road here, there's an antique map place. I went up there a couple of years ago, and they had a map I made in an antique store. I'll show it
How
here.
you done that though?
Yeah, I'll just do a few. This is an ink well that the early drafters used. And this is a ruling pin. You just tighten the screw on the top, and it'll make the clamps go, if you want real thin line, go together and open it up. And they made these, instead of using an eyedropper in one hand and this in the other, they made one of these, the ink well, it'll just pick up and you put a drop of ink on there. This is one of my first calculators. It won't add or subtract, but it will divide, multiply. When I went there, the state didn't have a lot of money, they didn't buy stuff for us lower people there. But we had a Monroe calculator. I don't know if any of you remember those. You didn't plug them in, a bunch of wheels on there. All these numbers going across, 111, and all the way down, 22. And you could put in any number and add it, pull the crank, just like a cash register, and get your answer. However, if you multiply and divide something, you pull the crank, you must go down and get a cup of coffee. When you come back, you'll hear cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Okay. Next picture.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's the arc. There's that little bulge I talked about a few minutes ago, the arc line. And then it goes all the way over to New Jersey to the low water mark. That's
What was the significance of 12 miles?
to keep the government of Pennsylvania 12 miles away from the government of Delaware, which was at the Newcastle courthouse, which was destroyed or burned or something. They built another one on the same site. So supposedly, if you go up to the town of Newcastle, to the courthouse,
Old Newcastle.
Old Newcastle, you see the little spire on top? That's where you stick the compass, and then you make that 12-mile circle, which is actually about 3 arcs on there. But they all seem to come together pretty good there. And then it goes right on down the low water mark in New Jersey, and where that arc comes around again is Artificial Island. It'll hit the middle of the Delaware River. And the Supreme Court in Delaware, I think they addressed this back in 35, right, 30 somewhere, because there are a lot of oyster wars and fishing problems out there. So the Supreme Court had to decide the actual boundaries of Delaware. If any of you have Sharp's History of Delaware books, okay, they're kind of expensive. You can find one for $600, it's a deal. But you open up volume 1, and they'll have these different maps in the front of the state. And so you can see some of the way Delaware, the road from Dover down to Rehoboth, nobody got speeding tickets. You were on horseback back then. But yeah, you had to go in and out. And if you look at some of the old maps of Delaware, you see the local roads. Now you can see the old route that Route 1 took. Now, when you inventory roads or survey road, inventory roads, you go from south to north or west to east. So if you're coming across the country and you're at exit 34, if you look down, you probably see milepost 34. And then you're looking for exit 150. If you look down, there'll be an exit number 150. And you subtract those two numbers, and that's how far you have to go to get to that next exit. Except in Delaware, Route 1 out there used to be 14. And then they changed it to make it Route 1, and it goes on up. And then the later stages of Route 1, the last stages, that is a metric highway. It's a metric highway. And they put metric mileposts out there. And they're called, I learned when I was on the metric committee, it's called kilometer, not kilometer. I like kilometers. But everything's built metrically. So they put, instead of milepost 50, they put milepost whatever, how many kilometers that is. And that's the exit number 2. And people in Delaware didn't like, I never was a big fan of going metric, because if you tell me from here to there is 17 kilometers, I have no idea. Give me 17 miles, I can figure that out. So what they did, the people in Delaware didn't like those kilometer mileposts, so they went back to the regular milepost. But they didn't change the exit number. So the exit number you see going up Route 1, that's a metric number. And if you can do the conversion without crashing into somebody, you're doing good. And that's down here a little bit farther. Hope that's all right. Here's Ocean View. This is in the tour book of Delaware. I'll show you some of these tour books later. It says Ocean View, 1.5 miles, altitude 10, population 371. A small rambling village has no view of the ocean, whatever. It is related that when this settlement on White's Creek was known as Hall's Store, a boy climbed up on top of the tallest pine tree in the place and happened to look eastward and exclaimed, "I can see the ocean from here."
Wow.
The annual Ocean View Homecoming Celebration, first Thursday in August, is attended by crowds of former residents, their families, and friends from several states. Held first in 1908, the fair included informal picnicking, much visiting among long-separated friends or relatives, and scheduled speeches and concerts. The historian reads a piece about the past celebrations, and the poet reads the annual poem written for the occasion. Young people go bathing at the nearby Bethany Beach. From a backwoods community dependent on port to fair farmland, and on the fishing and crabbing of Indian River Bay, Ocean View since 1925 has become a highly prosperous center, one of the most important sections of the United States for the production of broiler chickens. You all know that story, I think. It was estimated 17 million broilers were raised in Baltimore 100 at the extreme southeastern corner of Delaware. All year long, except for the summer months, the trucks roll out of the village and 100 loaded high with crated live Plymouth rocks to be hauled overnight to New York, the most important market. Other trucks go to Baltimore, Washington, Norfolk, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. The dealers are constantly telephoning New York for the latest prices or speeding from one broiler farm to another to bid on marketable crops of 1,000, 40,000, or 100,000 chickens. Feed and coal trucks rush about with thousands of tons of material needed for 14 weeks it takes to turn baby chicks into broilers. This big business hums alongside by side with little farms from whom the wet soil is difficult to rest in living. State 26 and nearby side roads in the region are lined with frame brooder houses, some of which are 700 feet in length. Divided into compartments, in each one, a small stove warms 500 baby chicks until they're old enough to run out into the adjoining fence lots where young rye, clover, and other forage crops stay green. All winter in this mild climate, well-drained plots are chosen since dampness spreads disease. Only a small fraction of the feed is produced in the vicinity. Hundreds of carloads of mixed dry food are imported from the north and west. Nor can the region supply more than a few baby chicks required. Local hatcheries run largely on eggs from other states, and growers purchase millions of baby chicks from New England. Many broilers are raised on shares, dealers, landowners, and banks advance feed, fuel, and equipment to the growers. It is at the latter who suffer most when the price of chicken drops below the production cost. At 1.9 miles is the junction with the side road. Left on this road, and it goes on. It has it's from a tour map. I'll show you the book in a few minutes. That was just the end of the sentence, I guess. This is Campo Tonka, which is right down the road here. This is the book, Delaware from the American Guide series. I found this out in Oregon, I think. Whenever I go someplace, I look at used bookstores for something about Delaware, and found this. And this is a folded up map that's in the back that shows the tour that you can take through the state to different places. And 65 is, looks like Bethany Beach, and number 184 is Millville. So it goes all over the state of Delaware. And it gives a description of all these places. And it's got some really neat pictures in there, old pictures. This is from the History of Delaware book that I have, and it says Ocean View was originally called Hall Stores, located on the tract known as Middlesex. A post office was established there in 1822 with W.S. Hall as postmaster, who also kept a store at the place. James W. Davis now keeps the store and is postmaster. The Presbyterian Church was established in 1856 as a branch of Blackwater Presbyterian Church, and is served by the minister who is in charge of the latter. There are several hamlets in the 100 which contain a store and a post office. The place is called Tuttle's Store and has been known as such for many years. The post office was established there in 1887. A post office was established at Bayard in 1886 with H. Hickman as postmaster. That's the name of Sussex, Hickman's. Blackwater was made a postal station in 1821. Williamsville Post Office was established in 1879. The postmasters have been Thomas Taylor, Rufus Atkins, Samuel Bradford. Millville Post Office was established in 1886 with E.C. Dukes, another old Sussex family name. We also had a place at the store. And that came out of the History of Delaware, the Sharps. If you get that, it's really neat. It has there's so much history in there, it's unbelievable. It has little places, and it also has a list of all the ministers in the 100 and all the store owners and ministers. It's just a wealth of information. Some of it is outdated. This is the guide to the first state. That's where that map came from. The tour map was in that book, Delaware, a guide to the first state. If you find one, it's a really neat book to have. This is Dutch and Swedish place names in Delaware from University of Delaware Press. I guess it's done by Delaware Geographic Society survey. And I can hardly pronounce any of the Swedish names or Dutch names that are in there, but they used to be named. There's a Lindstrom map that has a lot of those names on it, which is, if you can find one of those, is worth a fortune. This is Delaware history brochure. You see them anywhere, but in this one it has the bounds of Delaware that has a nice dissertation on that. If you can find that issue from March 1947. This is I took a course in Delaware history about 50 years ago, 40 or 50 years, by John Monroe. He's really a good teacher. So that just happens to be one of the books you might find in your travels. Okay. Mason-Dixon line, Joyman line. These are two excellent books if you want to get all the details about the Transpeninsular line and the Mason-Dixon line. Good. We'll be out here by 9. This is a nice little book. I think it belonged to my sister. It's called Delaware Through the Years. It's got all sorts of information in there. The state seal, which is things that have changed on that since this has been made. But it's a real nice book about Delaware. Good. Liberty and Independence, the topical history of Delaware. These are others. I just happen to collect them. I really like. We have good information in them. This is the Maryland Board on Natural Resources, and in there it has all of the monument stones in Delaware. It has a picture of them and what kind of state they're in. Some of them have disappeared since this was done, but it's just a wealth of information. This is Delaware place names. That's the one I talked about a little while ago, where you can get the old names of places like Ocean View used to be Hall Store, and have all the variations, some of the days. And what happens is we had to take, through the years, we had to take some of our names off of our maps because they weren't politically correct. I'm not a real politically correct person, but we had to take them off. We didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And there's several names that the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, will not allow to be put on the map. If you have a crossroads out here and you want to name it after your family, you can stick a sign there, but it probably won't be recognized. it's a good idea, if your family lives there, to contact the post office, the fire department, Delaware Geological Survey, and USGS, and put in your proposal. There's sheets that you can fill out of the name you want it to be made, and any previous names, and why you want to do it. And they'll probably put a sign up there, and then your family or whatever you want. And if you can find that book, Delaware Place Names, it's really a neat book. If you can't, you go online and you can download the whole book. It's got all this, you can do that tonight if you want, and download all the names. This is just a couple other books about in Delaware that I just happen to have. I just want to show you they're available if you're interested in sending off for any of those. Here's a poem. It's a long poem, so I won't read it all. But it's in good old Sussex, and it's a real neat poem. It's about 4 pages long. I just did the first part. In good old Sussex County, down in little Delaware, I often say to Sarah Ann, I'm glad we're living there. The country's kind and humble, stretching over to the sea. It ain't stylish looking place, and don't pretend to be. There ain't a mountain anywhere, a holding up its head. There ain't no rocks, but only sand shining there instead. But there's all this welcome for you. You can feel it in the air in good old Sussex County down in old Delaware. And the next couple of pages are the rest of this poem. So you just go right through this.
They would sing this at homecoming.
Oh, there was?
And when Ocean View had homecoming here in the park in the 1800s, they would sing this song.
Oh, I was going to have you come up and sing it. But there's a poem, I think, in Hawker's up here at the grocery store. That's a poem also hanging. It's framed up before you go out the door. It might be the same one. I'm not sure.
Okay, are we at that's the end of the song?
Yeah. Yeah. These are some of the things that I used when I was making maps. You see the scribers or gravers up there, some are ridges. The drafting pen is no longer used. We found out it's good for cleaning underneath your fingernails. That's a map's wheel right there where you can measure on a map. This is dividers right here. So you can, it's got calibrations on there. So if you have a map equals 750 feet and another map that's 350 feet, you can set that so you put those 2 prongs on the little map, put it on the big map, and it's the same. It's just converted for you. Yeah. That's just some of the things. That's azimuths, boundaries, and geographic areas of the United of Delaware. And I'll just read one out of this book. It was reprinted around 1939. And it says, for a history of the boundary between Delaware and Pennsylvania, see Pennsylvania in these pages. From 1732 to 1769, there was a controversy between the proprietors of Pennsylvania and Maryland in regard to its boundaries. The boundaries of Delaware on the south and west are determined as follows. Beginning at Cape Henlopen and running due west 34 miles, 309 perches. And you notice it said Cape Henlopen. Up the peninsula until it touches and makes a tangent to the western periphery of the circle drawn at the horizontal distance of 12 English statute miles from the center of the town of Newcastle. So this is an old description of it, outdated. A lot of our early maps were, when the department started making maps, they gathered all the information there, and then they sent the information to revise the map and print it up to Chester, Vermont, to the National Survey. Now, this one is 1949. I'd like the women here to raise your hands and the men to raise your hands if this pertains to you. Think back when you were a teenager, got your first car, and you're going out on a date. So the men in here, raise your hand if when you put your date in the car and you got in, did she slide over next to you? Show of hands. Now the women in here, how many of you slid over next to your boyfriend when he picked you up? told you we cooperated with division of motor vehicles, with state planning, all sorts of things. And according to this, rules of the road, number 14, don't permit passengers or merchandise to crowd the driver's seat. Now you know. And that's, okay. Now here is the legend on the new maps. They had a 10-year dirt road program in Delaware years ago, and they finally got all the work, all the roads paved. So we didn't have to differentiate between different kinds of roads unless you're looking in the inventory book. And they'll give you a number like 3110 means it's a paved road over top of bituminous road over top of a brick road. It gives you the history of the road. And if you go over again, this is off the old Legend of Delaware. And if you notice right at the top, it says primitive road, and it's a dashed line. Then it goes to unapproved line. What you do is you connect all those. You didn't have to erase anything. It makes a mess out of the ends and on the scrub sheet. And then when it's graded and drained, you put the lines further apart, and when you come to soil surface road, it's got those little squares on there coming down, and when it becomes gravel or bituminous, you just color in every other, scrape it off so you don't have to erase anything. When it becomes a paved road, you just clean out the inside, because since it's a negative, it comes out black. So you don't ruin your map roads when you try to do it over again. And we used to put culture on the maps back then. Culture is little waxback symbols. One would be for church, one would be for fire department or city hall or anything like that. That's me. That's in the 70s. I probably have on bell bottoms. And that's the scribe sheet, what could get in that picture. And if you notice, it's upside down. Because you see the bay right here, and that's the Atlantic Ocean up there. And that's a grader that I was using to make the roads or the streams. This is a drainage map right here. Everything on here is printed 100% blue, so it'll be no outline of lakes or anything like that.
Whoops. We should have turned you around.
Yeah, that's okay. And this is it up in Newcastle County. That's the graver right there. And that's a template used. You could scrape out that and make the roads bituminous or put symbols on there for intersections. Okay.
That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Let me see if I have anything
Sorry
else
that
here.
we had you sideways.
That's all right. And I think that was just about all I have for tonight. But here's different USGS maps right over here that you can look at from 1954, 72, and it goes on up to now. And some of the early town maps of Ocean View to see the development starting to appear on there. And if you want, I have some Sussex County maps up here that Aaron gave us because they're not going to throw them away. They're going to use them any of those you want. And here's maps of the state of Delaware, the official transportation map that you can put in your car if you want. So if there's any questions, I hope they're real easy because